Tony Tokunbo Fernandez Show is all about promoting the true life and success stories of African and Caribbean achievers around the world. If there's a product or initiative you wish to share, feel free to give us a call. The number is 0788 280 9005.
Hello everyone, I'm Ndidi Nkwapara, creative producer at Soaring with Didi. I'm thrilled to announce that Soaring with Didi will be producing the first Leeds International African Festival as part of the Leeds 2023 Year of Culture. 2023 will be a year of culture like no other. In collaboration with our major partners, we're excited to bring together the African communities in Leeds to shout about their heritage and let their culture loose. Through African arts exhibitions, cooking competitions, music, and dance performances within the week of 8th to the 15th of July 2020. If you're an African living in Leeds, be a part of this. If you're an artist and you want to collaborate, go to www.leeds2023.co.uk and www.soaringwithdidi.com. Be a part of it.
A very warm welcome to all our listeners around the world. You're welcome to the Tony Tokunbo Fernandez Show, promoting the true life stories of people making a difference around the world. So if there's a product or initiative or story you wish to share, feel free to give us a call. The number is 0788 280 9005 or visit our website at www.tonyfernandez.co.uk. We have some amazing guests lined up this year on the Tony Tokunbo Fernandez Show. So it's all about promoting the true life stories of people making a difference and also highlighting the issues that really matter in community. And, you know, from week to week, we travel all around the world speaking to inspirational people. But this week, we're sticking in Yorkshire to speak with an amazing best-selling author called Linda Green, who's written over 11 novels, which have sold over 1.5 million copies around the world. So, Linda Green, you're based here in West Yorkshire.
I am.
It's so nice to meet you for the first time. How are you feeling today?
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, no, I'm good, thank you. And yeah, it's great to be able to have a chat with you about my book and about the reasons that prompted it, really. Yeah.
Okay, and the great thing about this show is that it's broadcasted and promoted in different regions around the world. So for the benefit of people today living outside West Yorkshire or even outside England, can you just tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and the things you're most passionate about in life?
Sure. Although I've lived in West Yorkshire for about 22 years now, I actually was born in North London and I grew up on the edge of North London and Hertfordshire. I was from a very non-political family. They were sort of the family that didn't really get involved in politics, but I, for some reason, was completely different to that. And I, as a teenager, got really interested in politics, but I was really particularly wanting to fight injustices around the world. So at 14, I joined the anti-apartheid movement because that obviously was something that was going on at the time in the 80s, which just from watching the news and following what was happening, you know, I was at that age when you're a teenager, I was pretty incredulous that this could be going on and the world could be letting this happen. So as a teenager, I went to protests outside the South African embassy in London, and I was became a lifetime member of the anti-apartheid movement. I went to the concert for Free Nelson Mandela at Wembley, and then again for, you know, after he was released. So I've always had that background of wanting to try and do my little bit. Yeah, I'm a great believer that we are all responsible, and we should all take a stand, and we shouldn't stand by and watch other people suffering and other people suffer injustice. So I, maybe partly because of that, I always wanted to be an author essentially, but I went into journalism because I was so passionate about news and current affairs. So I worked as a journalist for 15 years for a variety of regional and national newspapers and magazines. And then finally got my first book published, which had been a really difficult process. And really, as my career's developed, I've tended to, they're all novels that I write, you know, it is fiction, but I think it's really interesting how fiction has the power actually to change people's hearts and minds and engage with them in a way that sometimes as a journalist is difficult to do so, because people come with preconceived ideas if you're writing about a certain issue. The great thing as a novelist is that you introduce characters to your readers. You've got readers from a very diverse background. You can introduce characters, you can get readers to feel and empathize with those characters. And then when you throw in some issues, it can actually really make, you know, the readers stand up and think, oh, hang on, I've never thought about this before. I've never engaged with this issue. I've never looked at things from a different person's point of view, you know, seeing the world through their eyes. And I think that's a fantastic thing to be able to do as an author, to actually raise awareness, really, of things going on.
Talking about seeing the world from people's different eyes, we're here today to talk about your latest book, Little Stars, mostly inspired by the racial abuse faced by Vie Clerc and other members of the community in West Yorkshire. What inspired you to write this book, and what's the book all about?
Yeah, so the book is essentially, it was inspired by the stories I was hearing from friends, as you say, in West Yorkshire, about their experiences with the EU referendum campaign, and then sort of the Brexit campaign, and friends who were EU citizens were starting to be abused publicly and racially abused. Friends of colour in West Yorkshire, for some of them for the first time ever, were getting shouted at to go home in the streets. You know, this phrase of "go home" became really common, which was utterly appalling. I travelled from Leeds to Manchester once and got off the train, and some football supporters were abusing a black ticket guard at Manchester Piccadilly Station and shouting at him to go home. And myself and fortunately several other people stopped and sort of surrounded him and made sure he was okay, and they went away. But I just came home feeling so angry that this was happening in our country and that it wasn't being challenged. And then, as you say, my friend Vie had a horrific experience when she was travelling back on train from Leeds with her 11-year-old son, and basically sort of 4 white middle-aged men got on the train, and she had a small EU sticker on, and her son is of dual heritage, and they immediately started targeting her, actually like pulling her hair back, shouting "no surrender" in her face, racially abusing her 11-year-old son. And for a long time, nobody on the train did anything, came to their aid at all. Finally, one young woman came and sat by them and talked to them and offered to get off the train at the next stop, and they got off with her, and so she was able to report it. But again, it was that issue of, why are people letting this happen? Why aren't people getting, you know, involved? Why are people just letting people be abused in our country? That made me think I wanted to write a novel where it's not sort of the story of Vie and her son, but I've taken that situation where sort of the pivotal scenes in my novel are around a racial abuse which takes place on a train, and the issue of whether or not bystanders get involved, or whether you sort of stand up and actually, you know, offer support to that person, or whether you say, this is nothing to do with me, I've got my head down, I'm looking away, I'm not involved here. And I decided that I always find with these situations that the best thing to do is write a very human story. You know, I don't ever want to sort of ram a political agenda down somebody's throats. I don't find that's the best way to engage with people. So I decided to write a reimagined modern day Romeo and Juliet story where you had teenagers from two very different families. One of them was a French Moroccan family who had lived in this country for 20 years. And one of them was a sort of white working class family from a former mining community in West Yorkshire. And have the eldest teenagers meet at college, fall in love, but because of the very different views and political beliefs in their families, decide to keep their relationship secret. But that led to all sorts of pressures on them. And as the story develops and there are sort of far-right groups involved in the area who are trying to groom young teenagers in the area, and everything escalates. We get to the point where really decisions have got to be made about who is standing up against this and who is actually going to support these young people.
I mean, talking about settings and location, the novel is set in Leeds, Lower Moor, and Halifax.
Yeah.
Is that deliberate?
Yeah, I wanted to show, I think a lot of the media, the mass media after, or sort of all around the Brexit campaign and afterwards, were very quick to say, oh, you know, the North is racist and the North voted for Brexit. It's all their fault. And I wanted to highlight that is, you know, so not true, that there are many cities, you know, Leeds voted narrowly to remain, Liverpool, Manchester, Newcastle all voted to remain. The difference really was in the towns, and that was sort of my experience. And I was actually canvassing for Remain in Halifax, which is a town in West Yorkshire, on the EU referendum day. And it's a completely different views expressed to me than they had been in Leeds, which tends to be a younger, more sort of professional student city. And I wanted to highlight that as well, how very often the far right had come in and they targeted towns which have been left behind, where there's high unemployment and poverty and social deprivation. And they basically go in there and say, look, here's the people that are to blame. And they point the finger, and that I think is how they managed to get support and get that. So I wanted to highlight that issue, and by having it partly in the city where the teenagers are students and sort of there's more the professional, people that are going into the city, but partly in the towns where some of those you know, very racist views were persisting a lot more for all sorts of reasons. And I think that hopefully will show that it's not something that you could say is across the entire North. You know, as in any area of the world, there are always people on different sides in communities and with different views. And, you know, the book is very much about how we can bring people together. And I used the quote from the MP Jo Cox, who was sadly murdered during the Brexit campaign in West Yorkshire. And in her maiden speech in the House of Commons, she had said that, you know, we have much more in common than that which divides us. And I've used that at the beginning of the book because to me, that's kind of the essence of what I was trying to say, is that, you know, instead of concentrating on the differences, if we could only come together and look at what we have in common. And it was an important thing to me that although these two families that I created on the outside were very different, actually they were all juggling with a lot of the same issues, you know, raising teenage children, trying to, you know, help and support them at different times through life, elderly parents, you know, work problems. That actually so much was the same that they were dealing with, and it was just such a shame that they had decided that they were, you know, on such different sides and far apart and would never speak to each other or communicate.
I mean, the story and the narrative of racial tensions continues, not just in England, but in different parts of the world as well. As you know, only this month, we saw the racial assaults of a 15-year-old black girl in Ashford in Surrey, which went viral. And that must have struck a chord from you. Now, when this continues and you come up with your book, which is going to be launched shortly, how far can we go in making an impact for this conversation to continue and for it to make a difference?
Yeah. You know what I think is so important is that we all stand up, and within our own communities, we talk to people. We challenge their ideas and beliefs, many of which come from the mass media, many of which are spread on social media. And, you know, I was watching the appalling scenes outside Knowsley in Liverpool, which again we've had this week, where we had far right people gather outside a hotel where refugees you know, were being housed, and people, you know, showing absolute ignorance that, you know, these are people who should, we as a country, as Britain, should be welcoming to our country. We should, you know, say, here is a place of safety, you're welcome here. And instead we've got a section of the community who are protesting violently outside. And I just think we all need to step up, and we all need to have conversations with those around us, and just say, hey, do you know what? It's so easy to point the finger at people who are different or other. And so it's their fault. Our problems are all their fault. And there is no basis in that whatsoever. And in fact, they are the very people who need our help and support more than anyone. And I just think we need, you know, a very basic level, we need to challenge those, and challenge them, I say, within our own families, you know, and friends and communities. I'm sure we all know people who have got views, you know, which are not based on fact, but are based on, you know, all sorts of prejudices and bias. And I think it's so important that we all stand up and challenge those, and don't allow that to take hold. And don't allow, you know, politicians to drive that agenda and to call it out every time it happens.
I mean, when we talk about bridging the gap, how would you honestly describe the spirit of community cohesion in West Yorkshire? Would you say there's a spirit of tolerance, or would you say there's more work to be done?
I think there's definitely more work to be done. I think there are some amazing people doing some amazing work in West Yorkshire, but unfortunately, there are plenty of other people who are not listening, not engaging, and just deciding that they will believe the mass media, or they will believe politicians on the far right, and they will spread that message, you know, around. And there is still a huge division in West Yorkshire, as there is, you know, across the country and in many parts of the world. And yeah, it is about finding ways to work together to challenge that. I say to shout about the amazing work that's been done, because I think that's so important. We often hear negative stories, and it's really important to get some more positive stories out there. But also, I say to challenge every time when we hear, you know, people saying things which simply aren't true.
I want you to take a couple of minutes right now to speak to all our listeners around the world today about your latest book, The Little Stars. Why should people buy it?
Thanks, Tony. What I hope the book does is that it will open hearts and minds. It will challenge your beliefs or thinkings, and it will make you think about how you can be a better ally, how you can support people. More than anything, it's a really moving, emotional story about two young people who want to be together, but the hate in the families and community around them is threatening to tear them apart. And it's a story about love and hate and loss and hope. And what I hope readers will take from it is that sense that we all have our part to play. There is no such thing as saying, I'm not involved, this doesn't involve me. We're all on this planet, we all need to get along, we all need to find ways forward. And I hope the novel, you know, already I've had some really great responses from people who've said, I wouldn't normally engage in issues like this. I sort of say, oh, not interested in politics, or not interested in Brexit. But by introducing fictional characters and their stories, and them caring about those characters, and then seeing what happens if people decide that, you know what, I'm not going to get involved, hopefully that will I say change some minds, and you know, make people think long after they've read the book about the sort of neighbour and ally they want to be.
That's beautiful. Now, The Little Stars by yourself, the amazing Linda Green. Where can people buy the book?
Yes, the hardback is currently available in Waterstones and in independent bookshops. And the ebook, it's available on Kindle, on Amazon, and the audiobook is also available. The paperback, if you want to wait for that, will be out in August the 17th this year.
Okay, that's fantastic. And on a very final note, what message do you have for all our listeners around the world today?
I think it's a simple one, and it's the one that I think comes from the book, which is that, you know, hope is strong, love is stronger than hate, and hope is, you know, it's such an important thing that we should all have, and we should all make sure that, you know, it's the love and the hope that is promoted, and not the hate and division.
And you know, the amazing thing is that when we bridge communities together, there's more a sense of understanding and togetherness. And so that narrative, that story continues. And I'm hoping that after this book is launched, there'll be more conversations to make our world a better place. Keep up the amazing work you're doing, and we'll catch you soon.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks a lot.